Hello family, Mukhaisu Dumela. Welcome to The Voice with me, Palisa. Remember, this is a channel for you, with you, by you, giving you a chance to tell your story. This is your comfort space. This is a safe space. And of course, this is a space where you can get power to gain your voice back. And today, Pagati inside on The Voice, I'm telling you, I've got this powerful guest, right? She's powerful. She's a woman of God. She's an overcomer. She is a mother. She's a businesswoman. And she is a wife. Mrs. Teddy. Hello, you. Oh, man. I'm so happy to see you.
I'm so happy to see you too.
But now the tables have changed. Now,
yes,
yes. Now I'm interviewing you.
Now you're interviewing me.
Because first when I came to your podcast, I was so nervous, and then I'm like, yo, let me tell you something, right? Before I get to your story, when I first came into your podcast, just when I walked in there, I was not in a good space at all. I wasn't in a good space. But when I saw you sitting there and you welcomed me with a smile, and you were sitting there with your laptop and typing, and just by looking at you and by meeting you, like I was healed.
Sure.
I was amazed that, I'm like, I wasn't expecting, that, like your book says, what do you see?
Yeah.
But what I saw when I came to your podcast, I must say that I really got healed.
Sure.
By a lot of things. But anyway, story for another day. Today is about you.
Sure, wow. Oh, wow. That is so powerful. Yeah.
Tell me about yourself, like your background, where you grew up, and, family.
Sure, where I grew up. So I grew up in two places. So I got burnt when I was 11 months old by a candle. Lost my right hand, 4 fingers, and my face is scarred and so forth. I was then in a coma for 3 months. I was then in hospital for another 3 years immediately after that. And then I was basically, most of my life, I was mostly in hospital. But the reason why I'm saying both places is because home at the time was Go Makapanstad. Which is in Hammanskraal. But then I was also at boarding school full-time, which is in Westcliff, So I was mostly, actually, I grew up in 3 places. I was at school, I was at hospital, and then sometimes I would go home, and then it's only in 2003 when we then moved to Soshanguve, and then that became my home. But then I was also still in boarding school. So I never really grew up in one place. You know what I mean? So I was mostly in hospital, boarding school, and then sometimes I would go home on like weekends, So I grew up in a lot of places, but I want to first start with Makapanstad. Makapanstad was home, but also Mama created that beautiful environment for me where she even founded like a nursery school so that the kids around our neighborhood could sort of like get used to me, from a very, very young age. So it was home, in a sense that everybody knew who I was, and none of them found me weird, you know what I mean? Because they sort of like grew up with me. So Makapanstad was home. Like I would walk anywhere, and it was just normal. But also, I think that's also the beauty of like a small place, because like everybody knows everybody, so like Makapanstad was home, it was family, like your neighbors, your family, It was just such a beautiful place. And then we moved to Soshanguve, which was a very different atmosphere, The ambience there was completely different, Firstly, the houses are smaller. They dish up like differently, It's sort of like, but here like things are a little bit more expensive, But everybody sort of like minds their own business. You know what I mean? It's sort of like suburban, but kolikishening, you know. So the township and the rural is very, very different, you know, in that sense. But also because people didn't know me per se, I chose to hide myself and be in the house. Unlike Komakapanstad, where I was everywhere, you know. In fact, every single Fridays when I would go home, my friends would, they knew that like Tulu Fitli, you know, and they would go and they would fetch me.
So your other name is Tulu?
Yes, yeah. So
okay, I want to understand, right? When did you start noticing who you probably could be different? You know, at what age more or less did you start realizing or recognizing, maybe I'm, you know, I'm bent or I'm disfigured, you know, in this way?
I think I always knew that I was disfigured because I would hear stories like, so when I was a baby, my brain scales, like they literally expanded, you know. So I would hear like things like, I would like go to people and say, look at what I can do. And then I would go to like a wall, you know, like bang my head, you know, against it because of like that, you know, expansion. So it was sort of like liquids, you know, and then, yeah, and etc. So it was just things that I was aware of, but it wasn't a problem because the people in my neighborhood sort of like, you know, accepted me the way that I was. I think when it started being a problem was when I was in school. And then a fellow learner of mine said to me, oh my God, you're so burnt. You know, you look like a franchise meat. I was like...
It was in primary?
Yeah, it was in primary. I was 9 years old. You know, and then he was like, you look like a franchise meat. Oh my God, you know, Skobogwena. And I was like, ha!
You know.
Yes, you know what I mean? And I think that's when it really started affecting me to a place where I was like, oh, so I know that I'm burnt, but now it means that I'm not beautiful. You know what I mean? Because of my burns, it means that I will never ever be attractive. It means, you know what I mean? So for me, that's where the low self-esteem started creeping in. It was when I had heard somebody mention it and say it, but in a negative manner, that then, you know, affected me. And that's how I would say that I really started being conscious about it. And that's how I started going through that whole like low self-esteem and yeah, and just trying to kill myself. You know, I was just like, I was really, really depressed. Yeah.
So at that moment when you started realizing or recognizing, and especially when kids started saying these things to you, what did you say to your mom, and how did your mom explain to you what happened? Can you take us back, you know, to how it got to, you know, to like where it got to you being bent? What stories did your mom give you? Because I'm sure you were 11 months at that time, and you were probably, you don't even remember.
I don't even remember, yeah.
So what did they say, what happened?
So my mom says that, so that day, her and my dad had gone shopping, and then I was wearing a pink and a white dress that they had just bought that day, you know. And then my dad left, my mom, and so my mom and her brothers were in the very next room, you know, from like where I was. But also my mom came and then she breastfed me, and then I slept, you know. And then she left me in the bedroom, and then she went to go and sit with her brothers. And then while they were...
the lounge.
Yes. And then while they were having dinner, then they started smelling smoke, you know. And then when they started smelling the smoke, my mom then found me on the bed, burning, 70 degrees Celsius fire. She rushed in, she picked me up from the bed, and then my right hand stayed behind.
So the bedroom caught fire?
The bedroom caught fire. I'd say mostly the bed. weird, hey? Mostly the bed caught fire, and then me, and then when she lifted me up from the bed, my right hand stayed behind. She rushed me to hospital.
So there was a candle by the bedside table,
yes,
maybe pedestal, and the baby was sleeping on the bed. So maybe that candle caught fire or the candle fell.
I think the candle fell. So according to my mom, the candle was on the bed. You know what I mean? So we don't know if maybe while I was sleeping, I sort of like knocked it over, or like what was happening, or if I was awake, maybe I was playing with it. I don't know. You know what I mean? But according to my mom, I was sleeping, and then the candle then fell on the bed, to an extent where I wasn't even crying, so nobody heard me cry. Even when she came into the bedroom, I was still not crying. You know what I mean? So we don't know if I was crying and then the pain became so excruciatingly painful that I stopped crying. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's the story that I was told by my mom. And then she rushed me to hospital, and then I lost my fingers even more, my ear completely came off, my brain scars were showing, my nose was completely burned as well, my lips, yeah, it was really, really bad. It was like a very, very bad accident.
I can just imagine, what your mom went through at that time.
Yeah.
So at this time, where is your dad and maybe the family, going from there?
Look, my dad and my mom were married, but immediately when he heard of the accident, the guy left. He was like, no way, this is too much, and then he left. He got divorced from my mom, and my mom basically became a single mom, raising me and my siblings. I had 3 other siblings, at the time, and then I was the 4th one. And she just like raised us, she was a teacher at the time, and then she resigned from her profession to fully look after me. And then a couple of years later, I think while I was struggling with the whole depression, and so forth, then that's when she went to go and study social work. So then just as when I started becoming more independent, then she started working, as a social worker. Yeah.
And then from there on, you started like going to school. You said you moved from Makapanstad, to another area where maybe they don't know you. Then you had to start making friends. And so what was life like then, for you? Now you're being aware of yourself. Now you're going to school. Now kids are being aware. The people are being aware. What I'd like to, know at that time growing up, what was life like for you?
Look, for me, I chose to keep to myself when we moved to Soshanguve, because I was like, I don't know these people. I don't know how they're going to react, And the thing is with depression is that when you are in depression, you think everything is against you. You know what I mean? So just one stare from someone, you think, oh my God, they think I'm ugly. You know what I mean? And this person is not even thinking that. And then that immediately just like makes you want to like dig a hole, and just like throw yourself, in there. So, yeah, so it was a very tough one, in a sense that I thought that the world was against me, I thought that when people looked at me, like they saw a ghost, you know what I mean? So therefore I chose to keep to myself. I was like, I don't want to go out there. I don't want to make friends. And my mom, funny enough, would go out there and sort of like want to make friends for me, and I was like, no. But you know what I mean? Like, no. But this one specific friend, her name is Ndazi.
She the one that you talk about in
Yes.
the book? Yeah. The bestie.
You know what I mean? My mom actually fully orchestrated that friendship. So what she did was, so like when I was at school, I was very, very good, like with maths, academics and so forth. And Daisy actually struggled with mathematics. So then like what she did was, she was like, ha, perfect. When I'm Daisy, you must go to Solo, and then you must say that, girl, I need help with maths. You know what I mean? And then now I was like, oh, I'm so special. Yes, let me help you. This was my mom's like, plan this entire time. So now, as I was trying to help her with maths, now this girl is like talking about like other things. I'm like, girl, please, okay, you here for my mathematics skills, come through. And that's how the friendship sort of like organically grew, and we became friends. But now Ndazi also nearly like was Tratanyana, So like she'd be like, friend, man, like rakas patho, and I'd be like, nah, I don't really want to go. It's like, hey man, and that's how really I started allowing myself to get to know people, or like Soshanguve. It was because Ndazi just like threw me, in the wolves, and she was like, hey guys, this is my friend, and she just introduced me to so many people.
Maybe you went to, because I know that there's a school that your mother took you to before. I think maybe not the other school, the school of maybe the slow learners or anything like that.
Pretoria school. No. So like that was like primary school already.
Oh, okay.
So then I had already gone back to Hope School at the time. So that's how we sort of like got to know the people around Soshanguve, but also just how protective they were. I think God just sent you the right people at the right time, and I think he knew that I needed people who would make me feel secure, so the people that came into my life, at the time through Yena Ndazi, people like Bo Hlohi, Temba, they all made me feel like we've got you. If anybody says anything, we will kick their butts. You know what I mean? And they would also like come and fetch me at home, and take me to places. And that's how really I started getting to know people around Soshanguve, but also how welcoming they were. You know what I mean? Like they never ever made me feel like you are different.
Yeah.
And that is how then I started allowing myself also to sort of like get to know the people around, So
So tell me, do you find that maybe because of maybe how you look, maybe people would probably take you different because maybe they might think that you are not able to do other things that they do? Do you find that now you have to push yourself to work harder or to prove yourself? Because like when I also read your book, like you ended up working for, like the Metro FMs, the Urban Brews, big companies like that. And like I went through, reading all the challenges that you face. So I want to know, do you find that maybe do you want to prove yourself to say I can work harder or I can do this? Because some people might judge you and think, no, you might not be able to, to do this. You know what I mean?
I think when it comes to my dreams, I've always had to prove myself. Like, for example, like you mentioned, UBS, I mean, they didn't want me, I think I applied for an internship there when I was at my second year at varsity. And I applied, I think, just over 5 times. And there was this lady called Gia Baz, and she knew a guy called, a guy from Friends Like These. And then I called him, directly. And I was like, hey, I kind of like got your numbers from Gia, and I'd like to become your intern, he also refused at first, but I persisted, like I really, really persisted. I knocked at one gospel, I think twice or three times, and then they eventually just said, yes, just come through.
So what is a CV, or they had to meet you first?
They had to meet me, so everywhere where I've had to go, I've always knocked personally. One, to prove myself, but also just to say that, I'm capable. Like, I wouldn't come here and knock on your door if I knew that I couldn't, you know what I mean? So I really had to work 10 times harder just to show them that, I can do the job. With Metro, I was working at Friends Like These, at the time. And then I asked Sibusiso if I could shadow him at
That's DJ's boo.
Yes, at Metro. And then he said yes. So I was like, yay, great, yes, yay, let's do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I started shadowing him at Metro for a year. And then a year later, then he said, hey, would you like to become my content producer? So I was like, of course.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean?
So you're actually DJ's boo's content producer.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So... yeah, and that's how I became his content producer. But I think I had to prove myself first for a year, even still, like, to him as well, to say that, I can't do this. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I do feel like I've had to work 10 times harder than a normal person, because even people who think they are normal, they are actually not.
I was about to say,
you know what I mean?
Normal?
You know what I mean? But I do feel like I've had to prove myself just to say that, don't worry about my physical limitations. I will be able to do the job. And I think in most cases, when I do get an opportunity, I always take it like 10 times higher, just to say that I'm not here.
Brain damage, I'm not brain dead.
Yes, you know what I'm saying?
Smart,
yeah.
intelligent.
But I can even do it even much better than a so-called normal person. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I think that has been my pride.
Like I said, honestly, when I first met you, like what healed me was I walked in there in your studio and I found you typing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you do a typer and like you have no fingers. And then the next thing, I come here, your hubby comes in, you're like, oh, this is my hubby. Then your hubby kisses you on the cheek. I'm like, my goodness, at that time I'm going through the most relationship problems. So like, when I eat it, you don't understand. After leaving that studio, I looked at myself in the mirror. I'm like, if Itu can do it, I can do it. You know what I mean? So I know your hobbies here, so I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about something that I read here.
Yes.
Your first crush. Your heartbreak. How was it, knowing, okay, fine, as much as you bent, but there was somebody that looked at you and loved you. And tell me about, your first crush when you were a teenager. I get now, Mr. Petty, like, it is the past, ne?
Yeah, it's the past.
It's the past. All things are passed away.
Yes.
Behold, all things have become new. So how was it, the
oh my God, my first heartbreak.
Hey, wait.
I can't even remember. And I will tell you now, I think I only start remembering my relationships from varsity. I think those are the ones that mattered to me, because that one was more, I was more like conscious, I was more matured, and I sort of knew at the time what I wanted, but also what I didn't want, you know what I mean? So yeah, so the guy that I met in varsity was really amazing, as well. I think honestly, had I not met my current husband, I don't know, but I think in terms of like what I didn't want, it was his values, in comparison to mine, Christian, he was not. but also like there was just so much that I just couldn't tolerate. But also that comes with self-love. You know what I mean? It's when you start loving yourself the way that you want the next person to love you, where you're like, okay, no, this I'm not going to tolerate. You know. And with him, infidelity was the biggest part of it, and I was like, I'm not going to tolerate this. I'm sorry. But also that literally came from me starting to love me, and saying that because I'm now loving me and I'm now relearning to accept myself, but also to find my own beauty and my own voice, therefore I cannot tolerate being loved like this. You know what I mean? So then I met my current husband.
Yeah, I wanted to get to that. Like,
yes.
I just want to know, how did you meet? Where did you meet?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, please take me through that. That one is important for
Yes.
me. You know, I love celebrating love.
Yeah.
I love.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what's I had saying?
So with my current husband, I was still at UJ at the time, moved out because I was doing my last year, you know, and I was already working, you know, so I was just like, rest for who, darling? I'm out, peace, you know. So then I first moved to a place called Southgate, then I moved to Windsor. But it wasn't because I wanted to move there, it was just a matter of we had to sort of like move out fast, you know. So in Windsor, I didn't know that it was the place that it is now. And we were robbed the very first month, you know.
Yeah.
I was staying with a friend of mine called Lolo. And we got robbed that very first month. I called my mom. I'm like, listen, okay, we cannot do this. And then she said, okay, fine, move to a safer place and then I will help you guys with rent. So we were like, okay, great. And then we found a place in Northcliffe, you know. And this is how I met my husband. So we moved there on the 31st of May. And on the 1st of June, I was writing an exam. But now I didn't know where to find taxis, you know, and so forth. So I got out of my apartment. As I get to the parking lot, I find this guy, you know. I'm like, hey, he was by his car, I think pouring water or like something like that. So I'm like, hey, I'm looking for taxis to go to UJ. And I'm telling you, oh my God, oh my word, oh my God, just that first hi. All I heard was, hi, how are you doing? I'm like, oh my God,
That voice.
take me now.
You are so naughty. Okay.
I'm like, I'm yours, take me. You know,
A chamaka voice, so good.
by Kalakanya, go like the first hi. It was like, okay, he's the one, you know. And then he's like, no, it's fine. I will show you. So instead of showing me, he ended up taking me. Did you move here? And I said, oh, we moved in yesterday. Our unit number, I think, was like 96, mine. And then he was at 97. So he's like, oh, wow, I'm right next door. You know, I'm like, oh, okay, great. You know, by the way, just so you know, we got robbed. Okay, so this girl doesn't have a fridge. I don't have anything. It's like, yo, opportunity, guys. Let me go buy meats. Kilo yako next door. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And that's what I did, you know. And the rest is history.
But then tell me, when you met your current husband, did you probably not have that thing? Yo, otorike joang, is he looking at me? You know, I'm bent, or did you have that, maybe those insecurities, or was it like, you know what, I've accepted myself the way I am, and if you know, hey, you're the one that approached me, you're the one that said hi, you're the one. You know, how did it make you feel at that time? You know, especially now that your husband, okay, you know, will this guy understand you? Will he love you the way you are? Did you have those insecurities for some?
I didn't didn't because of my previous relationship. Because my previous relationship, like, if there's one thing that guy did, was to love me. You know what I mean? He loved me the way that I've always wanted to be loved. And I think he showed me what was possible. And he also got me so much out of my own, insecurities, to say that, like, you are just like a normal woman. You know what I mean? And therefore, because of him, when I met my current husband, I knew exactly how I deserved to be loved. You know what I mean? Because of how I was loved so beautifully from the previous relationship. You know what I mean? So I think when I got into this relationship, I was already aware of my beauty, but also like who I was. You know what I mean? Honey, I'm a child of God. You know what I mean? I am beautifully and wonderfully made and created, you know what I mean? But that came from the previous relationship, where it was just like, like, you are not going to speak like that here. You know, this is how we speak here. You are beautiful, you are stunning, you are this. Where you are being treated like a queen, where you are being treated like you are the most beautiful woman in this entire world. You know what I mean? So when I met my current husband, I already knew those things. And I was like, ooh, okay, honey, you're gonna love me the way that I deserve to be loved. And thank God he loved me from the very first moment that way. You know, he loved me the way that I wanted to be loved. You know, yeah, he's very caring, he's very kind, but also what we found common was that we were both, in the media industry. He's more of like behind the scenes. So that is what was common with us, and therefore that is what connected the both of us. I mean, like, we would watch TV, the entire time. And of course, because I was dropped, I was a girl in distress.
So tell me now, I know your mother as well.
Yes.
How is motherhood to you? How is it treating you? And how are the babies doing? Oof. They're not so babies anymore, right?
Yeah, no. Look, motherhood is amazing. It does have its challenges, where it just becomes too much. You know what I mean? But besides that, which every single parent goes through, I think it's the most beautiful thing that any person can ever be blessed with. You know what I mean? I remember, like, when I held my kids the very, very first time, I was like, oh my God, I wish I'd done this earlier. You know what I mean? Because it's love that you've never felt before. You know what I mean? It's like literally unparalleled love, where you are just like, I'm here to love these children, and I was blessed with twin boys.
Yes.
So I was holding one this side and one this side, and I was like, oh my God, and God just gave me double portion.
Amen.
You know what I mean? He was like, here's double portion, my child. And these two beings who just look at me and they're just mesmerized, and they love me, and they just see me as their world. I was like, what? You know what I mean? It is the most beautiful thing, priceless moment that nothing on earth can ever replace, And I think for me, it's such a privilege to be a mother to such beautiful and such amazing and such intelligent young boys who love me the way that they do. And I think more than anything else, I will hone in, on the word love, because I feel like that is what makes our relationship like what it is, because it's all just based on love. You know what I mean? Even like when they are naughty and they are like, now my other son knows how to like negotiate. You know what I mean?
How old are they now?
They are 10.
Wow.
Turning 11. They're like, yeah, but mom, listen. And I'm just like, excuse me. You know what I mean? So even when they are still trying to like negotiate and like do, it's all based on love. You know what I mean? It's all like based on, I will discipline you based on love. I will love you based on love. We will have fun based on love. But it's love that is so unconditional. Like, it's just so beautiful. You know what I mean? And I feel like that is the love that God has for us, because no matter what we do, God will always love us. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, that there's nothing that those kids can do that will ever make me not love them.
Amen, amen. So now tell me, with your kids being almost teenagers, and probably at school, have you ever maybe experienced them being bullied about their mother, at school or anything like that?
No, and I was so afraid that they would. But my one son, Botelo, he's very vocal, but he's also very stern, he's one of those ones who will be like, you do not talk to me like that. You know what I mean? He's one of those. And I think when I saw his personality, I was like, okay, so this one is not going to be bullied, because of who he is, but also how he's so stern. With Watile, I was more afraid for him, because he's more of like, not a weakling, but he's sort of like, yes, you know what I mean? Like, he's so soft, and was more afraid that he would probably get bullied. But I think because of the brother, people are like, okay, no, no. You know what I mean? But also the kids at that school, man, like, I don't know, like, the most that they've ever done is to stay. You know what I mean? But every time they see me, they're like, oh my God, there's Pochela and Watrila's mom. You know what I mean? And they've never ever made me feel like my kids will ever get bullied because of me, So I don't know, maybe it's a school, but those kids are well mannered.
So talking about this stay, do you usually get people staring at you when you go to the mall or wherever in public places, and how do you deal with it?
Look, with malls and stuff, I honestly don't even notice it, because it really doesn't bother me anymore. I don't even see it, I'll only probably hear of it, like somebody says, oh my God, like people are staring, and then I'm like, oh really, they are, and I think for me, how I started dealing with it was, I think when I started working, in the meat industry, and I started seeing how many of my like colleagues are sort of like being stared at because of who they are. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm also being stared at because I'm also a celebrity, darling. Exactly. Okay, you know what I mean? And that's how I started dealing with it. I was like, yes, I know people are looking at me because of, I'm a celeb. So, but now I honestly don't recognize it and I don't see it. I think with the kids, the only reason why I recognize it is because it's always been something that was lingering, to say that I really don't want my children to be bullied because of me. So when I would walk into the school, I was very conscious about how those kids looked at me and so forth. And that's why I was more aware of their stays. But in general, no, please.
Okay. Now talking about marriage, right? Your husband proposes, you guys are getting married, and you've got the in-laws, I'm saying this because I've got my personal experience about dealing with my in-laws, so I want to understand when their son came to them maybe and said, I'm getting married and to Itu, this is the love of my life, and you came in looking like that. Did you get any maybe looks, or maybe somebody saying no, or worrying, whatever it is? What was it like for the in-laws to receive a Magoti, a daughter-in-law, who is like you? Was there maybe worrying, hey, will she be able to carry babies? Will she be able, how should how did what was happening around there? How did
Look, I must be honest, my husband's family was so receptive of me, you know. I think the first day they saw me as their child. But also, we actually had the twins before the marriage, you know. So even when we went to them before to say that, just so that y'all know, okay, we want those damages paid, you know. That family was so receptive, like they were so loving, like from that very first day. In fact, they were so loving that even when I was pregnant, like his mom would call me daily, you know, have you had food? Have you done this? Have you, you know what I mean? His little sister as well was also very, very supportive. And even now when we got married, and now it was like the larger family, like still, you know what I mean, like they were so receptive. They accepted me as their daughter immediately, you know what I mean. I've never heard of one person who was like like nix, you know what I mean. In fact, I'm treated more better than their own child, like honestly speaking. It's just like like you must just like sit down, you know what I mean. I mean, there are certain things, you know what I mean. Yeah, so like there are certain things that I just don't do, you know, and they're okay with it, you know what I mean. And they've never really asked like, can you wash the dishes? And I'm just like, oh, if they don't ask, I also won't tell them that I can, you know what I mean. You know what I mean?
You seem to be positive, you know, especially throughout your life. You know, you've always had that thing, you know, I'm positive, and I think it has worked for you. But what are the challenges that Itu goes through? Do you have any challenges? It doesn't seem like, you know, the way you're talking, maybe you are maybe facing any challenges. What are the challenges in life that you probably can say, you know, you are going through or you overcame?
Sure. I think there are a lot of challenges, you know. I was actually having a conversation with Kota the other day, and I was like, you know, because with my social media as well, you know, I'm more of like the motivational one, you know. I'm motivating people all the time. I'm sort of like, hey, like let's reach our full purpose, life, you know, and so forth. And I just feel like when you put yourself in that spectrum, that you can't get to a place where you're like, yo guys, I'm now like struggling, you know what I mean. And there are a lot of things that I struggle with that I was saying to him that I feel like I can't even be vulnerable with, because like I'm like this like positive person the entire time, you know. And I meet people who are like, oh my God, like you inspire me so much, you like motivate me so much, and because of you
motivate me.
Yes, you know what I mean. And therefore, because of that, I feel like if I become vulnerable, that people might feel like yes, you know what I mean. So that's one of the challenges. I mean,
so much is expected of you.
Yes.
Because we took it like it is strong.
Yes, you know what I mean. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, but I don't know it all. You know what I mean? I don't have everything figured out, you know. I don't, like, I'm not Mrs. Know-It-All. You know what I mean? And not every day is a perfect day for me. You know what I mean? I mean, I struggle with a lot of sickness. You know what I mean? I've got a thing called anemia. You know, it hits me like rock bottom. You know.
What is that?
Anemia is low blood.
Oh, anemia.
Yeah. Okay. So what happens is that then like you'll have like massive headaches. You will have migraines. You'll be weak. You know, like you can't even walk. You know, at times. And then I'm gonna need iron infusion. Yeah. So it's like things like that where it's just like. There are so many things that I go through behind the scenes that I don't bring forward because of I'm the strong one, because I'm motivational, and you know what I mean? Yeah, and it's such a beautiful moment for me to be able to share that now, to say that, but I actually do go through stuff, you know what I mean? I actually do go through like challenges. I mean, now with my business, thank God, because of my followers, and so forth, like people support me, people buy, and now,
love you.
yeah, now the business is growing to an extent where I now had to start hiring. And that was a difficult moment for me, because I then discovered that I've got huge trust issues. You know what I mean? I've got huge trust. And I'm just like, I don't know if I can trust you with this, And that is another problem. You know what I mean? That is a challenge on its own, because I actually said yesterday on my Good Morning Gorgeous Reel that if you can't trust another person, it's also a huge reflection on how you actually trust yourself.
I listened to that.
Yeah. So how you project yourself upon the next person, it's how you actually see yourself. And I think a lot of people don't trust themselves, because you see it with, their insecurities, like when you do something and you sort of like start like questioning it, was that done well? Was this like, did I say this right? You know what I mean? That is you not trusting yourself. And that's how we end up not trusting people. It's because it's a huge reflection on how you actually trust yourself. You know what I mean? So it's like things like that, where it's just like an introspection, that you have with yourself. I mean, before, like when I was younger and I used to be asked the question, how are you balancing it all? And I was like, I've got everything like worked out. You know what I mean? And I think the more you grow and the more you mature and the more you realize that no, actually, you actually don't. You know what I mean? Like, you're a mom, you're a podcaster, you're in media, you're a wife, you're this, you're that. Not everything is going to get 100% from you. You know what I mean? And sometimes, it's the kids, sometimes it's your husband, he will get like 10% of you. And then sometimes the children will get like 30% of you. Sometimes your work might even suffer. But you don't give everything 100%. But it's how you prioritize, and say that, okay, fine, this is more important for me in this moment for this reason. Therefore, I'm going to give this 100%. You know what I mean? I think I was saying to you now that I feel like my social media is suffering because of now, like, my business is growing. You know what I mean?
About business.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Like, what business I'm interested
Yeah.
in? Because I know about the candle one.
Yes.
And I want to order one.
Yes,
I have
please.
to have it to end candle.
Yes.
Tell me about your business.
So with my business, it's that, it's a candle business which we started in 2017. And the basis of the business was based, on my story that, I got burnt by a candle. And therefore now I'm now bringing hope and healing through them, because what I learned while I was making them was that serenity and that tranquility that I got from a candle. And I was like, okay, this I just have to pass on. You know what I mean? Because candles are so healing. And I was like, if a candle could heal me, then a candle can heal anyone. You know what I mean? Because candles, they're soothing. And the different scents that you have got like different principles. So like a cinnamon vanilla, for example, that helps you with lots of stress. You know what I mean? So it sort of like helps you to like calm down. You know what I mean? Sandalwood, you know what I mean? So like the different scents that you get from a candle has got like different principalities. And I think learning that for me was life-changing, because my purpose is to bring hope and healing. And I was like, I'm now bringing hope and healing through my scents. So And for me, it's also so beautiful because, I got burnt by one.
I was about to say the irony in it that now what burnt you, now all of a sudden now you are actually using the same thing that burned you to bring hope and healing, creating candles. Sure, that's amazing. But what was it the first time, what was it like when you started maybe making that candle and maybe switching it on? Did it not maybe take you to what could have happened in the past? Sorry about that.
I cried. You know what I mean? I wept. The first time I made a candle, I cried. I really did. The second time I made it, I cried as well. I think the thing that kept on taking me back to make it was the end product. You know what I mean? That as much as I'm crying, but I'm still busy with it. Do you know what I mean? And then you see the final product and you're like, oh wow, this is so pretty. You know what I mean? And then the second time as well, you're like, oh wow, like this is so pretty. And I think the third time, that tranquility, like there was just so much peace that surpasses understanding that just came upon me in that moment. And I was like, and it was peace that there's peace that you get from like Christ, and then there's peace that you get from a candle. And I think it's like that tangible one that I got, immediately. And it sort of like soothed me. And I was like, why am I getting so much peace from this? And I think for me, because in the beginning, I was not making the candles to sell them. I was making them because I wanted to face my phobia. And when I started posting my candles on social media, people were like, oh my God, how much are they? I was like, no, I'm not selling them, and then people wanted to buy them. And I was like, oh, I could even make a business.
Of course.
So that's how the candle business started. I also got into wines. Aya's wines as well, and we did the pinotage, and we also did the sweet rosé. But the wines stemmed from a song called New Wine by Hillsong. And it says, in the crushing, the pressing, I'm making new wine, and where there's new wine, there's new freedom, and where there's new wine, there's new power. And immediately when I listened and I played that song, I was like, okay, but this song is talking about me. You know what I mean? Like, I have new power. I have new freedom. You know what I mean? And I am just a vessel of God, just saying that, guys, look at what God can do for me. Therefore, he can also do it for you too. You know what I mean? So if Christ Jesus could do this for me, just imagine what he can do for you. And I think that song is what made me and my husband start the wine business. But we've sort of like put like a pause on that, and we went back to the candles because it's always been about the candles. You know what I mean? It's always been about the candles. And every time I tried to move away from them, like God always like calls me back to the candles, and the way that the candles have grown to the point that it has now, where people's homes are being smiled of my candles, I think that is the biggest blessing that I could ever get from this business.
It is.
Yeah.
Wow. And now, talking about the book, where do we get it and what inspired you? The book says, what do you see?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Yeah.
It was book, like, what inspired this book? Because I read it, I finished it in 2 days, and I must say I was so inspired, I was so motivated.
Yeah.
I felt like you could have, written more and more and more. What inspired, what do you see?
So this book, I was at Metro FM at the time, and Sibusiso goes on air and tells people that I am writing a book and it's going to be ready soon. Like, and I'm like, no. I'm like, no, I'm not writing a book, And then Sibusiso's like, no, write a book. you know? And I'm like, yeah, but now you went on air, and then now like you told people that there's a book coming, and he's like, write that book, you know? And I was like, no, I'm not writing a book, you know? But fast forward, I then ended up starting to write the book. This was in 2014 because I launched the book in 2016. And I started writing the book. And the healing that came from this book, I didn't know I needed. I thought that I was like fully healed from the burns. But when I started writing this book, I realized that I wasn't, you know. And that's how I continued to write this book. I even got, I don't know, maybe like we can call it like a writer's blog. I even got like a writer's blog, and I flew to Cape Town for a weekend. And I remember sitting by the sea point, and I just cried my eyes out. I was like, Lord, this is too much for me. And I remember God saying, this book, my child, is going to bring you hope and healing. It's going to bring you, you know. And I knew that I had to go back and finish this book. And that's how I finished writing this book. So water sort of like brings me, I don't know, like so much more serenity. It sort of like refills me. You know what I mean? So whenever I am doing something and I get stuck, I know that I have to go to the ocean.
Yeah.
I just know it, because then the water sort of like recharges me again to sort of like start again. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that's what happened. And then I came back from Cape Town and I just finished the book, you know. But the book, I think for me, was the final stamp of healing from God to say that, okay, now we are healed. Now let's go out there and preach the gospel through your story. Now let's go out there and bring proper hope and healing. You know what I mean? Now let's go out there and show women that they are beautiful. You know what I mean? That they are made by God, that they were created by God, that they are more than conquerors, that there's nothing that they cannot do. You know what I mean? That through Christ that we can do it all. You know what I mean? Now let's go out there and show people their true power. You know, and it came from me finishing this book. So thank you, Swisison.
Yeah. And on that note, you know, talking about beauty, I know that you were also chosen to be an ambassador of Dove.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was like, yo, that is so amazing. I mean, being an ambassador, you know, of Dove, you know, so I think you're big up to that. But what also inspired me was, I know that you went through over 100 reconstruction. You know, how was that for you? You know, before we close, just quickly that, you know, I mean, like over 100 reconstruction or facial or surgeries.
Yeah.
Sure.
Look, for me, it wasn't a thing. I think because I was still a child. Professor Scholes was amazing. You know what I mean? I mean, that guy's like my dad. You know what I mean? And he said, he was so clever. He said, we need to fit in all of the surgeries before she turns 15. Because once she's 15, then they won't heal the way that they need to. So at a time, I will literally go through 10 surgeries at one go. You know what I mean? I mean, I would write my exams in hospital. It was insane. But for me, it was exciting because, you know, I was a child, you know what I mean? So I didn't really see it, you know, as weird. It was my norm, you know, at the time. I mean, like, I had lots of fun, you know, I think I tell the story all the time. There was a time when I went through like a leg surgery. So he had to sort of like cut my vein here because my leg was sort of like straight the entire time. So he had to cut the vein so that my leg would then be able to bend. And I remember he was like, you have to keep her leg straight up, in hospital. Shem, not me. Nah. I was like, Shem, it's not going to be me. I would run away from those nurses. Then they would come and look for me in the room and I wouldn't be there, and I would just like run away from them. If you're looking for me, come and find me. You know what I mean? And it was just so much fun, man. You know what I mean? Like I had so much fun, but also I had a community of people who would come and check up on me. I don't know where those people came from. I don't know who sent them. I don't know where they even heard of my story, but I had so many people, companies who were just there to just see me through. You know what I mean? I would find women who would come to hospital with like a basket of like chocolates and sweets and chips and flowers, and things, and they would just bring me amazing things, at hospital. So I never felt alone. My mom was there the entire time, like my school was very supportive, I had Professor Scholes, who was also very funny. So it was just a very beautiful moment for me. I think it's only now, looking back, I'm like, damn, 104? I'm like, oh my God, okay, no way, that's quite hectic, you know what I mean? But I think had those surgeries happened after I was 15, maybe they would have affected me. But I think I was too young, I was a baby, I was a child, I wasn't really into things, so I was just having fun, like securities would run after me, nurses would run after me, you know what I mean? So it was just very cool.
So what message of hope would you give to your followers, your fans, those who love you, What message would you like to leave?
I don't have fans, I have family. Ooh, bo, 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 bo.
Hi,
family. I'd like to say to my family, that, and I always use this quote, it's a quote by Lao Tzu, and he says, mastering others is called strength, but mastering yourself, now that is called true power. That every single day, let us work on mastering ourselves so that we can find our true power that lives within us. True power is not an external thing. It is a within thing, because once you find your power from here, nobody else can tell you anything. You know what I mean? You just become an unstoppable force. Yeah.
And any future plans, and if people want to get hold of you, to invite you maybe, or to buy your books, how do they get hold of you?
So they can go onto our website, www.ayascandlesa.com. Please purchase yourself some candles. And let your house just smell amazing. But also, I'm also at Morningside Shopping Center every single Fridays and every single Saturdays. So please come through there. Meet me. Please come and purchase some candles as well. And then I'm also on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I'm at ITU_SEKHU. And then Facebook, Itumeleng Sikupedi.
And your podcast?
Yes, my podcast is called Perspective with ITU. Please come through and watch our podcast. It plays every single Thursdays, and we are actually starting to shoot again now. So it will be available from April.
So Itu, what scripture do you live with? What do you want to leave your followers, with your family, with? What scripture can you give them?
Sure. I think I'd like to leave them with Ephesians 3:20. I love that scripture so much. And it says, I will do exceedingly and abundantly, more than you could ever pray for, request, you know. He is going to blow your mind. He is going to bless you beyond your wildest, imagination. And before you even get to that blessing, you need to perceive it, you need to see it, and you need to pursue it. You know what I mean? That when God gives you vision, honey, there's nothing that can stop you. And I think if nothing can stop me with one hand and with one finger, then nothing can stop you when you've got 10 fingers and 2 hands. And just remember that God is the author and the finisher of your faith. That whatever that He has begun in you, He will surely bring to an end, but only if you are willing to pursue it. So pursue it. Let's find that power. Let's go for it, and let's run the race.
Amen.
Yeah.
Exceedingly,
Yeah.
abundantly,
Yeah.
above all that you
Yes.
ever think
Yeah.
or think of. Itu, thank you so much. Like, I'm really honored to have you right here in The Voice.
Sure.
I'm happy to see you again.
Yeah.
Like I said, you inspire me. I was excited when you accepted my call to say,
Yeah.
Palis, I'm coming. I'm like, hey, it
Yes.
is coming. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mukhaitu, thank you again for watching The Voice with me, Palisa. Please do subscribe, do share, do follow, do like, do talk about it, but ke a leboga go tswa ka mejako ga se go latlhana go tswa go nna Palesa Madisa kwani kokomane ya ga se bolae ke re salang sentle.